In the first video, I explained that the universe was created by a tulpa or thought form thinking itself into existence. The link to this video is in the description. In this video, I'll be discussing the significance of this for mankind. Although we have our own desires and goals and are ultimately free to define our own reason for living, the being that created us had a distinct higher purpose in mind. Now, if somebody thinks themselves into existence in an intense blast of self-belief, it's unlikely they would do so without considering a purpose for themselves. To exist means to think about why you exist. Awareness of your own aliveness necessitates this in intelligent creatures, and the tulpa would be formed from such a large amount of thought that it would, by definition, be extremely intelligent. By logical extension of this, the tulpa's thoughts about its purpose endowed itself with one. That means that if all other creatures stemmed from it, they too have an end goal that the original being had in mind. What is this purpose, and how is humanity working towards it? To look at this, we need to examine why the tulpa created other beings and didn't just remain alone. To suggest that it would have been lonely if there was no other creatures around would be to unnecessarily attribute human emotions to it. Is a great white shark lonely because its nature is to patrol the seas alone as opposed to in a group? What about other solitary animals? Of course not. This indicates that the tulpa spawned other beings to iteratively move towards accomplishing an objective. This brings us on to the topic of evolution. Scientists now agree that the theory of evolution is imperfect and that not everything can be explained by the survival of the fittest. Arguably, an example of this would be the development of altruistic behaviours that could lead to the death of a creature before it can breed. Such behaviours don't exist in lower order creatures and have therefore clearly been formed via evolution. This implies that we are working towards becoming more empathic beings as time goes by, but are doing so slowly on a step-by-step basis. Evolution also fails to explain why our consciousness as opposed to merely our thought processes are becoming increasingly complex. Scientists generally view consciousness as being like a dimmer switch as opposed to an on-off switch, with more basic creatures having less clearly defined subjective qualia. The behaviour of less sophisticated insects and other primitive creatures suggests that they are able to plan but not imagine, and that they have little sense of self. But what advantage does consciousness have in terms of survival? It's arguable that a non-conscious robot with an extremely high degree of intelligence programmed into it could live just as long as one that is endowed with qualia. So why would evolution drive consciousness forwards? The answer to this is that to be conscious is not only to cognitively empathise with other beings, but to have the ability to place ourselves in their shoes and feel what they feel. This is a prerequisite for a deeper empathy based on shared humanity as opposed to cold hard logic. Why would the tulpa that created us want our levels of connectedness and kindness towards each other to increase? The reason for this is a desire for reunification of the many disparate thoughts that comprise it. We are beings forged from its mind and it desires unity. This is a concept that is present in all the major world religions. In Buddhism and Hinduism, the ultimate state of being is described as awareness without duality and separation. In Christianity and Judaism, there is much talk of becoming one with God. In Sikhism, a concept known as priority monism exists, whereby God and the soul are identical in the same way as fire and its sparks, and the latter seeks to return to its source, which is the former. Our end goal is a wholeness made of a plethora of different parts, the abandonment of the ego and the subsumation into a single cohesive entity. Does that mean that we have to pursue this goal? Well, not exactly. A person can decide that he or she prefers separation and individuality, and that's perfectly valid. The goal is long-term and overarching, and perhaps something to be strived for but yet never attained. It could be argued that death also makes it harder to achieve unity with the Creator, as with each person that dies, an element of the tulpa is erased. However, if there's infinite time, mathematically speaking, everything that can possibly happen will happen, no matter how improbable. This includes the reassembling of the particles that comprise each individual human being, including their distinct personalities, experiences and qualia. Once a person has come into being, he or she will therefore reoccur time and time again until the final goal is realised. Now that I've said a bit about our higher purpose, I would like to take some time to elaborate a bit on the science behind the notion that the first being was created by thinking itself into existence. You might be surprised to learn that minus the use of the word tulpa, my perspective on creation is actually shared by some well-renowned mainstream scientists. The mathematical physics journal Entropy is a high-ranking peer-reviewed journal. The Simago journal rank is amongst the most widely used ranking systems for academic journals and ranks and assigns them quartiles to designate their levels of academic rigour and prestige, Q1 being the highest and Q4 being the lowest. Entropy is a Q2 journal. It therefore clearly doesn't contain pseudoscience or junk science. In an article entitled The Self-Simulation Hypothesis, Interpretation of Quantum Mechanics that was published in this journal, the authors proposed a theory whereby the universe is thought into existence by itself. They said the following: the universe self-actualizes itself into existence via self-simulation using a mathematical code and a simulation game rule called the principle of efficient language. The salient idea is timeless emergentism, wherein the total simulation run can be viewed as one grand thought. Does that sound familiar? They then go on to demonstrate that this theory is mathematically congruent and conclude that it is a better fit for explaining creation than other theories of the origins of the universe. There is a plethora of other evidence that will be presented in future videos. Now, the next video will look at something a little different though, and examine whether the traditional notion of a devil exists within my framework for understanding the cosmos. I hope you'll join me to find out. In the meantime, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.